So let's take a look at how this layout works. We're going to just rebuild it from scratch. It won't take very long. So this UI was generated by Copilot, and this entire thing is actually generated by AI. So outside of Copilot, I went to Stable Diffusion and generated this background. That took a little while to clean up. I generated this image based on almost this exact same description. And then I generated these icons. And then I used Copilot to put it all together in the video, which you might have seen. But if you haven't, you can go and check it out at flexalon.com/AI. So how does this all work? It's basically, in this case, just a bunch of flexible layouts. You have a panel surrounding the whole thing. It has a flexible layout top to bottom. It's got the title, then this image, then this paragraph, then this rewards text, and then these two. These two are also put into a flexible layout. Each one inside of that has its own flexible layout, so it's flexible layouts all the way down. So let's try to recreate this. Start off with a canvas so that we're starting from scratch. And we're going to create a panel just like this one. So that's just a flexible layout in the negative Y direction. And we're going to give that an image for the background. Then we have, I'm going to use the same image that I had for this one, which I think is this one. And it's important to say that let's increase the size so we can actually see what it looks like. Okay, so now it has some sort of size. You can see it's all squished together. And it's important when you create a back panel to set the image type to sliced. And I had to go in and with the sprite editor, make sure it was sliced so that these corners are always visible and don't get stretched with the scale. And so now if I increase the size of my flexible layout, you can see that we have this nice little panel where we can start dropping things in. Once we have a few items, we can change the height to layout so that it just fits the objects within it. So let's add inside of here our title. Let's see if we can show this guy. Yeah. So let's go ahead and add the title, which is going to be Text Mesh Pro. Go into UI, Text Mesh Pro. Type something in. And you can see it's white. That's no good. So we're going to use the color picker to pick the same color as, let's say, this. And change the size up a bit. And now it's in the middle here because flexible layout by default places everything in the center. So we can change the vertical alignment on the flexible layout. And it's a little confusing because in Unity, Y goes in the up direction. And so we actually have to align it to the end of the Y-axis. And so now it's at the very top here. So how do we prevent that? We don't want to count these borders as part of the layout. So we can add a padding to the flexible layout to make sure nothing is put along those borders. And so in the Flexalon object, there's a padding field. You can change, let's say, the top here to 20. Let's increase it a little more. Put it somewhere about there. So that's about 85. And we can make sure the bottom is also 85. And then the left and right, they look okay right now because everything is centered. But once we have this image, we might need to increase the padding on the left and right. So let's add the image. To do that, UI image. And you can see that now the flexible layout is placing things left to right. That's the default. You'll actually want it to go in the direction of the negative Y-axis. Again, Unity Y is up. And so now we have title and then image. Drag this image into the sprite. And we want this image to fill up the width of the whole panel. So we can add a Flexalon object to that and have the width fill panel. I can see it's stretched, and the reason it's stretched because by default, Unity doesn't check this preserve aspect ratio checkbox on the image. These are all things Copilot takes care of for you. Okay, so now you can see we do need to add that padding to the flexible layout. So on the left, we're going to add 20. Oh, sorry, not margin padding. And to the right, okay, we need more than 20. Let's keep adding some. There you go. So now it looks pretty good. We do have this kind of really close gap between the title and the image, so we can add a bit of a gap to the flexible layout. And that'll add the same gap to everything else that we put underneath. Okay, so next we need some more text. We can actually copy the text from the other one because I want to retype it. You can see Copilot added a few more layers here. In the case that you wanted to add more things like an icon next to this text, it's kind of adding different sections and then adding the text under those sections. We don't need them just for this demo. So we're just going to grab the text directly, drop it into the flexible layout. And there we have it. Very easy. And then we're going to add another piece of text for the rewards. Make that bold. Okay, so, and center align that. So, okay, we have a problem here, which is that the text is starting to fall off of the canvas, and so off of the panel. So we want to change the height of our panel to adapt to the size of its children. So change it from fixed back to layout. And there we have it. Now we want these two boxes. So those are just images with a color on them. But they're arranged horizontally. So we need to create a new flexible layout just for them. Flexalon, flexible layout in the X direction. So that's all correct. And then underneath that, create two images next to each other. We're going to give them the same color as this thing. There we go. And we want, you can see they have sharp corners. In Unity, the way to change the corner radius is to choose a different sprite. So we can choose the UI sprite, which has slightly rounded corners and a little bit of margin on the edge. And then we can space these out. And in this case, I want them to take up the whole width. And so we can say the gap type is space between, and this flexible layout should take up the whole width. Probably a better way to do this actually is to say I want to specify the size of this gap between them, and then I want the objects to fill in the rest of the space. So instead of space between, we're going to have a fixed gap of, let's say, this much. And then we're going to go back to the images, and we're going to add the Flexalon object component to them so that we can fill the remaining space. And we don't need them to be so tall, so we could change the height, something like that. Now we just need to add our icons, and again, those are just more Flexalon layouts. So to each of these images, we can add a Flexalon layout component. Flexible layout component. And then underneath that, we can add a image for the coin icon and some text. Change the size of this to 16 and change the image size, let's say 30. And then we can have it, in this case, we want it left aligned, it looks like. So I think I just need to add, change the gap between these. So add a little bit of a gap and then change the alignment to the start. And again, we need to add a padding to this layout so that things are not butting up right against the edge. So we go back to our parent layout, add a padding, the image layout, add a padding to the Flexalon object left. So that looks pretty good. And then we can duplicate that for our other image. In fact, we'll just duplicate the whole thing and change the image to sword. And you can see here, so this is an interesting bit, which is that the text is falling off the edge. And the reason is because we haven't put any constraints on the size of this text. So even though it's overflowing, by default, largely for backwards compatibility reasons, the size of the children will overflow if they're just too big. And so to fix that, we need to be able to shrink this object so that it can constrain itself to the size of the layout that it's in. So let's add a flexible Flexalon object component to this, and then say that it's, so we can do this one of two ways. We can either say its size is the rest of the layout, in which case it will squish the text to fit its own size, or we can say that this thing needs to shrink to fit within its parent layout. And I'm going to try the second option, where I set the width to 0, the minimum width to 0, and that allows it to shrink all the way down to 0 if needed.